Okay, so a while back I made a video about vPro, and specifically because I was wondering what this thing does that's on these EliteDesks as far as their little sticker. And as I was playing with it, I found that okay, this is a way that you can remotely connect into a computer, has its own IP address. You can turn the machine off, you can bring it up, you can make, other changes to the system, find out information about it. Just another sort of a backdoor method to be able to get into a machine, especially if it's locked up and you want to be able to, start it up, or you don't want to have to, find it, or maybe it's up on a shelf, whatever it might be, to be able to turn it off and to turn it back on. As I started playing with it though, and this was happened fairly recently, I started to see that there's a difference depending on the type of CPU you have, the type of unit you have, and what you can do and what software will work with it. Specifically, in my prior video, I showed Mesh Commander and Mesh Central. Both are used as ways of controlling remotely a computer. Mesh Central is more for the case of, I don't know, you might consider it more at the enterprise level, network level, so that you have a lot of units that you're working with. You could pretty much do the same with Mesh Commander. It's just that Mesh Commander tends to be a little more focused on a single computer. So I wanted to go over just a little bit on the hardware, but then dive into the software, the options, how you can do remote control, and just some stuff that helps to add to my prior video. You want to watch the prior video if you want to find out about like how do you go in and even turn it on in the system. So a couple definitions. We are going to be talking about vPro, which also oftentimes is referred to as Intel AMT. There's also something called Intel Standard Manageability or ISM. And so we want to kind of show some of the nuances and differences between them. This is just kind of out of context, but one thing you will want to pick up is one of these headless adapters. This one is for DisplayPort. They do sell them for HDMI. You're going to need to have this on the back of the unit if you want to be able to remotely see the screen on one of your units that, of course, that's not connected to a monitor already. In a prior video, when I was doing all the testing, I had my unit connected to a monitor already, so everything was working. And then some viewers pointed out, hey, you're going to need one of these if you truly want to do remote desktop to a unit that all it has connected to it is just power and network. So here we've got an EliteDesk, and it's got the vPro little logo on here. Now, when it comes to EliteDesk, the EliteDesk 800, this is a G3. In order to have the full capabilities, you have to have an EliteDesk and you have to have an i5 or i7. I discovered as I was doing some research and playing around with all my different units and remote connectivities that if I had gone with a less expensive i3, I couldn't do some of the features. Primarily, I wouldn't be able to do remote desktop, and it would not show up in Mesh Central if it was turned off, and which means then I couldn't get to it to turn it back on. So to have the full capabilities, you need to have an EliteDesk 800 and you have to have an i5, i7. Next, we have the ProDesk. Now, with the ProDesk, you don't have the little vPro on the stickers. So with the ProDesk 600, you can have any processor. And I tried it both with the i3s and the i5s. Doesn't matter. With it, you're going to get the same capabilities as an EliteDesk with an i3. So you're not going to have the full-blown Intel AMT. You're going to have closer to this Intel standard manageability. And we'll show that differences in a little bit. Then you get to the ProDesk 400. This one I tried with i3s, i5s, all different combinations. I could not get any sort of remote connection that resembled something close to part of the Intel AMT family. Strangely enough, it will show that there's BIOS for it, but unfortunately you can't access it. I tried all the various tools. They would just hang because they couldn't find what they needed to in order to make it work. Kind of makes sense. I mean, the ProDesk 400, a little more consumer oriented. It was definitely a cheaper unit. I'm pretty sure that if you were to look at the G2s and the G4s, probably you're going to run into the same sort of tiering in terms of the EliteDesk versus the ProDesk 600 versus the ProDesk 400. Next, I want to get into the software. And we're going to look at both the Mesh Commander and Mesh Central, see what we can do with them, and what we can also do with the units themselves to be able to still get to them via the web. So let's first start with the EliteDesk 800, and this is one that's running an i5 processor. So this is the full bore. This is the one that is true vPro. You can do all the stuff with it. So it happens to be this one. I've turned it on. It's this particular IP address. If I click on it, I can go over to Intel AMT. I can connect to it. This also has that little headless adapter for the display port. You'll know that you have the full bore if it shows remote desktop here. The other way you can tell is if you go to Internet settings, this user initiation options will say BIOS and OS enabled. One of the nice features is that I could do the remote desktop. Not very exciting, but that's since I don't even have a boot drive in here. But if I did, I might be able to see, let's say, Windows, Linux, whatever. So that's the case in which I've got, the full bore. So, and if I wanted to, I could come up here and we can click on power on, and we're going to power it down. And if I look, the power is off. And if I refresh, now it's off. If I go back, if I disconnect, I go back to my list of devices, you notice it's still in, it's still bold, meaning, hey, I've got some sort of connection to it. I can click on it. I can go into Intel AMT. I can connect to it. I can go into power, click on it, and I can say powered up. And I look over and the power is on the unit, and I should be able to refresh and it should show power on. And now we've got power on. Now that we've taken care of the 800, let's look at a ProDesk 600. So now I've powered up my ProDesk 600. It happens to be this one here. If I go into here, then I can connect. You notice I don't have the option for the remote desktop. If I go down to Internet settings, I'm getting that undefined. And even if I try changing it, it doesn't stick. I can do things like power. I can change, I can shut it down. So if I shut it down now, okay, power is off. Let's try a refresh. So it says that's off, but if I disconnect and I come back here, if I left it for, let's say more than maybe 5-10 minutes, when I'd come back in here, this would go black again. And right there, I wouldn't be able to connect. So now if I try to go in, there's no connect button. And the reason is it doesn't have sort of this full Intel AMT. It has what's known as Intel standard manageability. But you can still get to it, even though it's turned off now, through its own web interface. Let me show you that. So if I want to go into the web interface for the unit that's been turned off, that I don't have access to from Mesh Central, what I can do is type in the IP address followed by the port, which is the 16992. That will come up with this login. It's going to say Intel Standard Manageability. If I was connecting to a EliteDesk 800 that had a vPro on it, it would actually say Intel AMT. So if I do a logon, I'm going to type in the password and such, and that was set up when I, activated AMT, and you'll have this interface. And you can do things like, you can still under remote control, you can power it back on. You can look at hardware status, information on the system, network settings. Those can be tweaked if you needed to. There's something you can download which is called the Mesh Commander firmware. If I go to Mesh Central and then go down to Downloads, you'll notice something here called Mesh Commander firmware. If you download that and run it, this will pop up. You're going to type in the IP address of the one that you want to add this firmware to. Again, put in your password. And now what you can do is you can either load it. There's both the standard and advanced. Let's go for advanced. Say next. Maybe because it's off. Let's try turning it back on and seeing if we have better luck. All right, the unit's back on. Let's try it now. So that's the trick. If you want to upload it, the unit's got to be on. But that's good because when it came back on and it reloaded, and now this is the interface, which you might be a little more familiar with, because if you've used Mesh Commander, you've got this stuff, which is kind of cool because then you can, use it. Kind of gives a consistency, but you can do the same sorts of things. Now your power on and power off are right here. You don't have to go into Mesh Central. You can just do everything from here and be able to do it. If I go to internet settings, I can even add servers if I wanted to. Now I'll include a link in the comments, is that there's a version of Mesh Commander that you can install on a server, and so that way it's accessible by all your machines on the network. And when you add machines to it, then you can check out all of the various systems and be able to still administer them. Let me show you what that looks like. So here's our Mesh Commander. It's not running on let's say a machine that either a local machine, and it's not running on an actual machine that I'm going to control. I have this actually running on a VM that's on one of my NASs. And so that way then I can get to it. So here's that 105. And if I click on it, it's going to go in, again, the very, the Mesh Commander interface that we're used to. I can tell it to power down. Okay, and then they're soft off. Let me disconnect. I come back here to my Mesh Commander. It's still sitting there. And I go, oh, okay. So in the case of Mesh Central, I wasn't able to connect to it again, but in case of this Mesh Commander, I am. So I click on Connect, and I check the status. Power's off. I can power it up. And it's back on again. Disconnect. And again, I got all my different units I can add to on the network. If you're primarily going to just be using the EliteDesks with the actual vPro, the i5 type of CPUs, I would go with the Mesh Central. Mesh Commander, it's not being actively updated. It was from Intel. It's kind of like out in the wild now. Folks might ask, well, what about the 400? Is there anything I can do with it? What about with Mesh Central and these agents? So these agents are little pieces of software that will run under either Windows or Linux that kind of simulate a way where you can jump in and look at screens and shut down machines and all that sort of thing. I played with it a little bit, and it's still a problem at the end of the day is I can't turn the machine back on. And because since the agent runs on the OS, and the OS isn't going to be there until you're fully booted up. So with all of this, in terms of 800 versus 600, i3 versus i5, it does make you think, what do I want when I'm deploying a machine that's going to be used 24/7, as a NAS, as a firewall, as some sort of hypervisor like running Proxmox. Maybe for those, you would want to focus on something that you could have as much control as possible. And maybe that's when you would look toward the EliteDesk 800 and also make sure that you're using an i5, i7. I know myself, I think there's some I'm going to have to maybe upgrade. I have to think about what exactly I want to do with it. As long as I can do the remote bringing up and down, I think that's probably okay. I don't know if I would be doing as much the need to be able to look at a desktop and so forth.